So I'm going to try and keep to the schedule, hopefully, with this. So, J. Frederick Grassle, or Fred, as people knew him, that had called him, that knew him, loved small organisms. It was what he made his career on, benthic organisms in particular, but his legacy really comes from the fact that he was a big thinker. He really had several careers, but what he will probably be best known for are some large global programs that he had the courage to think of and was the sort of person that could actually pull that off. Fred started he did his undergraduate work at Yale, moved on to Duke. He ended his career at Rutgers University as the director of the Institute of Marine and Coastal Sciences. He was the author of over 80 publications. He had many species of marine organisms named after him. That's quite an honor. Most people never have a single organism. He had an entire genus of polychaete worms named for him. He was awarded several prestigious medals. The one I want to highlight is the Japan Prize that he received in 2013. He was quite honored by that. It's a very prestigious prize. He was at Woods Hole in 1975 when Emperor Hirohito of Japan visited Woods Hole, and Emperor Hirohito was a marine biologist himself. He's the author of several publications, scientific papers, and his particular specialty was hydroids. And so when he came to Woods Hole, of course, there were lots of official events that had been planned, but the emperor made it very clear that what he really wanted to do was go to the labs at Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution and look at hydroids. So here he is looking at the microscope, and the gentleman behind him there, and also here, people in this room may recognize as Dr. Susumu Hanjo, who was a geologist at Woods Hole at that time. So Emperor Hirohito loved his visit to Woods Hole. It was quite an honor for the scientists at Woods Hole to receive him, and I think he enjoyed his time, and the Empress was with him as well at that time. That was during the time when Fred was in Woods Hole, 1969 to 1989, the Woods Hole oceanographic years of his career, really in the middle of his career. His early research focus was on marine benthic communities, deep sea biodiversity in particular. He also had some funding to study the way communities recover from perturbations like oil spills, hydrocarbon pollution. Fred split his time pretty equally between research cruises, which he loved. He loved being at sea, loved the excitement of discovery. And you see him on the left there. That's a very typical photo of him surrounded by sampling gear and samples that had been brought up from the bottom of the ocean. And then on the right, also a typical photo, big smile. He's a big man. If people have never met him, he was over 6 feet tall. Big man, big personality, and a big smile as well. But his career and marine biology changed dramatically in 1977 with a cruise to the Galapagos Rift off the coast of Ecuador. In February 1977, research vessel Nor and Lulu, accompanied by the submarine Alvin and a crazy, there's Nor and Lulu, and this crazy steel contraption of a sled called Angus that was instrumented with cameras and some other instrumentation, with geologists, geochemists, and geophysicists on board, went to the Galapagos Rift. They were specifically looking for rift communities. They had seen evidence of them in the Mid-Atlantic Ridge, but this is when the hydrothermal vents were discovered. It was quite an extraordinary cruise, but as I said, they had geologists, geochemists, and geophysicists on board. So on the right-hand photo there they are in the main lab on Nor, and they're looking at images coming back from the Angus sled. And at the time, those were black and white, and they start to see these extraordinary communities on the bottom of the ocean. People had never seen anything like this. They were so excited, but there weren't any biologists on board. They were geophysicists. But they started to see amazing imagery, things that no one had ever seen before. This is at 2,500 meters of these thriving communities. So clearly, there's no sunlight down there. what they realized is that they needed biologists on the next cruise. That was one conclusion that they made very quickly. And so when they came back, there were scientists from Woods Hole on that cruise, and they came back, and Fred Grassle, being a benthic ecologist, was one of the first people that wanted to talk to them. So Fred led an effort, and they wrote proposals. It took them a couple of years to get the funding. They did succeed in getting funding from the National Science Foundation for a cruise to revisit the Galapagos Rift. And Fred realized that he needed to hire more benthic taxonomists because there was clearly a lot of work to do. I was fortunate enough at the time, that's me on the right. Yutaka showed a picture of himself decades ago. There's my photo of your IODE co-chair decades ago. I was a benthic taxonomist in those days. Princess Polychaete was how people referred to me. And I want to remind you that this is what photographs usually look like of the bottom of the ocean at 2,500 meters. All right, so in January 1979, the biologists got to go to the Galapagos Rift. They went with the Lulu again as the tender for the submarine Alvin and the RV Gillis. And it was very much a multidisciplinary team of geologists, geochemists, biologists, also engineers because they needed to design a lot of new equipment, and photographers as well, specifically from the National Geographic Society. There's Fred in the ball of the Alvin submarine. On dive number 884, finally got to see what he'd been hearing about for a couple of years. I can only imagine how excited he must have been. And so this is a photo of him taken by Al Giddings of the National Geographic Society. So at the time, there are 3 people in the ball of the Alvin, a pilot, and 2 scientists. In this case, one of the scientist spots was given to Al Giddings of the National Geographic Society. So for an hour or so, this is what they see. They've been waiting for years, and they have to sit and look at the blackness of the ocean as they go down. And it takes over an hour to get the submarine down to 2,500 meters. And they turn on the lights of the submarine, and this is what they see out the porthole of the submarine. Fred is quoted as saying that nothing could diminish the excitement of the first view they had of the life at the bottom of the ocean at this rift. It was quite a fantastic moment. They're looking at communities that are thriving down there, organisms that are enormous, bigger than anybody had ever seen on the bottom of the ocean at this depth. And they're not powered by the sun. They're powered by chemosynthesis. It was quite an extraordinary discovery. This is a photo from a NOAA Oceanus Explorer expedition. The red pigment there on those riftia, these are polychaetes, these large tube worms, is hemoglobin, which is how they were breathing down there. But in addition to those, there were clams, mussels, anemones, crabs. It was just thriving communities of organisms, quite an amazing moment in marine biology. They had, these are Galatheid crabs that were scampering, is the word they use, scamper, a lot of activity, very active communities, scampering about on the mussel beds, on the pillow lava. As I said, they also had engineers involved in this that were very much engaged in the design of this research program. They had worked for a couple of years to design brand new specialized equipment. In particular, this is a respirometer, to figure out how these communities were living down there, based on chemosynthesis, not photosynthesis. So this is a cruise I was on with Fred in 1978. This is aboard the Lulu, the tender at the time for the Alvin submarine. Fred was an avid reader. He was an avid writer as well, as you can tell from 80 publications. He often read when he was at sea. It was one of his favorite things to do when we weren't actively sampling. And I think that for most scientists, the discovery of the hydrothermal vents probably would have been enough for one career, but not Fred. He, as I said in the title, he studied small organisms, but what he was really known for were those big, really big ideas. And he had the courage to follow those through and put together the resources to make those large ideas a reality. In particular, 2 of his big ideas. One was the Census of Marine Life, which then led to the Ocean Biogeographic Information System, or OBIS. And one of the things I'll also point out for this Data Exchange Committee was that Fred was one of the first scientists I worked with that recognized the value of metadata. Metadata itself may be not too interesting to scientists, but Fred recognized that to get the really big science and the synthesis science and to work with researchers from other disciplines, they needed to document the data, and in that case, physical samples as well, to exchange with colleagues so that they could really think about the bigger questions. And as I said, this led to those global ocean biogeographic programs that we're very grateful to Fred for having the courage to think of those. So that's Fred. Those are two very typical photos, always smiling and then thinking all the time as well. He was an extraordinary, extraordinary man. I'm so honored that I had the chance to work with him and just be near him when he was being such a wonderful person. Yep. Okay, you want me to go? Okay. So that's the end of my introductory slides. And now I have the honor of introducing our lecturer this morning. As I mentioned at the end of that talk, Dr. Grassle was one of the founding fathers of OBIS. To honor his memory, OBIS has created a lecture series in celebration of his vision. The vision to bring together marine species distribution data into a common searchable format for science and for future generations. Last fall, in 2018, OBIS selected nominations of outstanding scientists and data managers who have made a significant contribution to OBIS in a variety of ways, including data, tools, scientific publications that use the data available from OBIS. The selection committee has chosen Dr. Yoshihisa Shirayama, whose major research field is marine biology, especially taxonomy and the ecology of the deep sea myobenthos. So I think it's especially appropriate that he's the first selection for this lecture. Dr. Shirayama has already received several prestigious awards for his research excellence in the field of marine biology, including the Cosmos International Prize in 2011 for his work as a member of the Scientific Steering Committee on the Census of Marine Life. Dr. Shirayama has been involved in OBIS since the early days, and in 2001, he became a member of the OBIS International Committee. He is currently the director of the Global Oceanographic Data Center of JAMSTEC, as well as an associate executive director of that prestigious organization. And they also operate the Japan OBIS node. So now it is my pleasure to introduce the person selected to present the very first lecture in the Fred Grassle Memorial Lecture Series, Dr. Yoshihiro Shirayama.